Welcome back, everybody. It's Monday Morning Marriage Minute. Hope you had a fantastic Thanksgiving. And let me just explain, last week I did not get a chance to do a Monday Morning Marriage Minute, and I'll explain why. The week before, which we'll continue on today, we talked about porn. And apparently if you want a lot of email from men and women, but a lot of women, you just need to talk about porn, because guess what? That'll just light up your mailbox. So I think I've gotten back to everyone's email. Continue to try to do that. And don't forget, send your questions to 1minutemarriage@gmail.com. And I'll keep answering them. That not always immediately, but I'll get to it, I promise. And then again, also thank you for subscribing to my YouTube channel, Monday Morning Marriage Minute on YouTube. Pass it on with your friends, family. So let's get into it. Let's get into the second portion, and maybe 3 or 4 parts to this on porn. The last video we talked about the chemicals and the addiction, and we kind of tied that to how the brain, when it orgasms, wants to connect, and how with pornography it doesn't. So one of the things you need to understand is that through this process of all these chemicals in your brain, you start to become desensitized. And so the incredible thing is that porn companies, people who create porn, they understand this process better than anybody. So they understand that they have to create porn that's more and more strong, that's more aggressive, that's more violent, that is much more diversified. They study all the fetishes out there. So you can look for porn which guy and girl, guy and guy, girl and girl, girl in knickers, guy on horse, girl in snowstorm with horse. It's obscene and crazy, and they do their best to make sure that there is a type of porn out there that you connect with that builds that fetish. But again, it has to get harder and harder and harder and more aggressive, to the point where you get a Jeffrey Dahmer, who, in order to get an erection and to get excited, had to actually murder his victims, because again, like last episode, we talk about how pornography actually triggers the part of the brain that deals with anger. So I don't want to get too carried away or too far into that, but I want to cover again what this chemical reaction when you have an orgasm does, especially in the realm of porn, and then we'll talk about in a regular relationship. But the thought of why porn works is because it works. It gives you a high. I collect old medical books, and one of the medical books that I have, it has a prescription for a headache, and it includes goose urine, cocaine, and whiskey. Well, guess what? I don't know why you throw goose urine in there, but it works. It gets rid of your headache. Unfortunately, it also builds an incredible addiction. So would love to meet the doctor who came up with that. But anyway, porn works in what it's supposed to do, which is to give you this contact high, this release. But some of the other things it does, it tries to bond, and it can't bond because there's not a real person there, so it creates this trigger to anger. It builds an addiction to those chemicals, so you become addicted. Many men find themselves not able to sleep at night unless they masturbate because of that release of dopamine. And it also, again, creates this desensitization, so you have to have harder, more extreme types of porn. It damages the cells in the hippocampus. It also creates scar tissue in the arteries, and it creates scar tissue in the brain, and what we call neoplasticity. You begin to cement these terrible brain patterns in place because of this chemical reaction and this scarring. And one of the last two is it especially in men, creates in men where they only see women as objects, and that bleeds through everything they do and all of their interaction with women, which is very, very dangerous, because I'm not afraid to throw a hammer across the room because it's an object. And when that starts to creep into how I treat women, then it becomes very dangerous. But here's the other thing. Here's the analogy or the DNA behind an orgasm. It does 2 things. And you can look at it from the side of pornography, and you can look at it on the side of a committed, monogamous relationship, which I call marriage. But here's what happens. With pornography, what ultimately happens, even though it's an image, when you get into another relationship, it destroys the ability for you to connect or to have trust in a relationship. Actually, what happens is it creates in the brain the ability, or I should say inability, to be able to connect with someone on the 3 different brain waves that we see in our brain, which is love, friendship, and sacrifice. And those are 3 really well talked about. If you want to read more about it, read Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. But he talks about the 3 different brain waves in our head that are to connect with someone. And what porn does is it destroys those 3 and the ability that those 3 have to connect with someone. So it builds distrust, it builds anger, but even scarier is when you find that right person and you want to get married. I have found many men in my office who say, man, I found the right person, we got married, I love this person, but I just can't seem to stay connected. I don't know what it is. It's because they've literally caused such a degree of brain damage in their brain that they can no longer connect. See, outside of any religious viewpoint, outside of any fanatical viewpoint, the truth is that your brain biologically was created to connect with just one person. And if you connect with just one person, marriage, guess what? That connection becomes incredibly strong, incredibly valuable. So when you have an orgasm within the bonds of marriage, here's what happens. That connection is strengthened, it's solidified, but it also builds incredible intimacy, incredible trust, incredible vulnerability. Why is it many times, men, after you have a really intense moment of sex and orgasm between you and your wife, why is it many times at that point she's willing to share with you some intimate detail? Like maybe it's I wrecked the car, or I bounced some checks, or I think I'm fat. But there's some vulnerability there. Why? Because that sexual encounter between husband and wife continued repeatedly again and again builds this type of intimacy, builds this type of security and this trust where one another can be vulnerable. And in that is the true beauty of marriage. And that is the true beauty of what sex does. That's where that oneness takes place. So understand that the porn industry is out there to destroy everything, in regards to that, and is really out just for your dollar. And they want to build that addiction to build your dollar. But in doing so, it destroys your ability to have that perfect relationship or that good relationship in marriage. There's no such thing as perfect relationship, but in order to pursue that never-ending perfect relationship, it destroys your ability to connect so you can. So that's it. And next week we will talk about the woman's perspective on pornography and why women struggled with porn way before men did. But we'll get to that next week. Thank you for your viewership and for checking us out. Continue to share the videos, subscribe to YouTube, send your questions to 1minutemarriage@gmail.com, and remember to spend time with your best friend because you're married to them. We'll see you next week. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Thanksgiving, all that jazz. We'll see you.